in between your kind of your Mountain Dew and maybe your, and we're live!
Hey everybody, this is at Doc Foreman. It is Sunday night again. Our season is winding down, but our guests are going strong. I am really thrilled tonight. I know that we've had a really great series of folks in the technology and social media space the last few weeks. But before we get any further, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, hashtag SPSM Unpacked happens the hour after this. We can't believe that you want 2 hours of suicide prevention, social media, and innovation conversation every week, but you do. So please do go to the Blab, hang out with Atos84 and Chris Maxwell, aka Max Factor. You will have a great time. I'm at Doc Foreman. Like up the SPSM Facebook page. We're going to keep you apprised of our last couple of episodes going into the end of the spring season, and then hashtag SPSM Summer for a bunch of community-driven suicide prevention content all summer. And our wonderful co-producer and technology specialist, Tony Wood.
Hey everybody, at ADWWW on Twitter. Tweet at me if you have any questions for the guests. I'll probably try to get them to the guests.
Maybe.
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 And everybody, it's Dr. Bart Andrews. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Amazing to be on the show. So excited about having David. Just reading through David's bio was quite an impressive experience. Very, very cool. I'm really excited. I am at Bart Andrews. You can find me on Twitter. I hang out there occasionally in my downtime. I am from the amazing Behavioral Health Response in St. Louis, Missouri, a groovy crisis agency in the St. Louis area, proud to provide crisis services in the state of Missouri and other parts of the world. I'm kind of taking a counterpoint to the goodness that is Doc Foreman. I am not surprised that you all want to spend another hour with SPSM because this group is passionate about suicide prevention. They're passionate about our message, and we know that Amelia and Chris are rock stars, and I think that we're just the warm-up act. I think for Unpacked is what's kind of happened the last couple of weeks, and I'm okay with that. I'm just excited about the show. I do have an update. We're starting a petition, and this April suggested this. We're trying to get Facebook to change the like to licks, right? so that instead of liking something on Facebook, you lick it. So you can get 30 licks or 40 licks. So I think we're going to get some traction.
Know that we've been licking all of our guests whenever we find them in public. He doesn't know about those Instagrams.
So yeah, make sure that let's get the word out to Facebook. We really want licks. We don't care about likes. Licks is where it's at, my friends. And welcome to SPSM!
Woo! And just a real quick shout out to Des Stage, who's at Yale, and just had to tweet to everybody that she was at Yale. Too bad she couldn't be with us.
Yeah.
Our guest.
Wait, I heard that her polo horse was ill. So I don't know. There was, right, Tony? Did you hear that? There was a problem with the polo horse, so I don't know.
Was she on cricket this week, or was that?
I get. We'll get a Des Yale update. Bitsy, her friend Bitsy, says, "Hey to everybody."
Oh my God!
Oh.
He's gonna shank you. So everyone, without any further ado, I want to interview and introduce Dr. David Putrino of Putrino Labs, tweeting out from @Putrino Lab. It's fabulous. This is another one where we're bringing you a wonderful guest. We found out about this guest because of social media. Has some wonderful technology innovations. Uses social media in the interventions. Also has wonderful use of crowdfunding and just keeping people apprised at what his very versatile lab does. Dr. Putrino, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. It's so great to be here, and what a lively discussion it's already started out to be.
Get all the stimulants.
Yeah, I know. I should have packed more heavily. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I run a telemedicine department out of a place called Burke Medical Research Institute, and I'm also an assistant professor at the Department of Rehab Medicine at Cornell. My whole job is to try and use technology to make people feel better. I started out life as a physical therapist, so I did a lot of clinical work, working primarily with people with neurological disorders, but with lots of different people from lots of different walks of life. And then I did a PhD in neuroscience and tried to understand how we can help people with neurological disorders get better. And now that's kind of what I do full time. I try and improve people's quality of life with technology. My projects range from just, remote patient monitoring projects where we're just making sure that people stay healthy and check their blood pressure and do things like that, all the way out to really advanced robotics projects and exciting things with public health in the Sudan, where we 3D print prosthetics for people, and we also have this wonderful app for suicide prevention that we've been developing over the past year and a half, that we're about to take into a couple of large-scale clinical trials. So I guess that's what we're here to talk about today.
Did you say clinical trials? Now, David Putrino, a couple things that you don't know. So we were at the American Association of Suicidology conference a couple weeks back, and you probably don't know who Marsha Linehan is. She's probably the most famous clinical psychologist on the planet, and I feel like that's a reasonable thing to say. And she does research on helping folks with borderline personality disorder and high risk for suicide. And she talks about how difficult it is and that there are 0 clinical trials when it comes to doing real clinical trials for people at risk of suicide with self-harming behaviors and things like that. In fact, getting ready to go into a clinical trial for any kind of project, let alone an innovative technology solution for people at risk of suicide, is hugely groundbreaking in our field. Tell us a little bit about the journey to do that, because you're printing prosthetics in the Sudan. It's not always, the dots to suicide prevention apps is not linear for the rest of us.
Sure. Really, there's a few basic, when talking about sort of telemedicine interventions and e-health and digital health and all of these things, there's a few basic principles that are really important to me. And number one is, first of all, create something that is going to solve a problem. We all know that. So you need a clinical problem to solve. And then you also need to make sure that you're creating something that is developed in a way that people are going to want to use. So compliance is important. And so, the first thing that we did, basically, I've been developing all sorts of different interventions for people and trying to find clever ways to get them into people's lives. A great colleague of mine, Dimitris Kiosis, he wandered into my office, and he's working at Cornell. He's an associate professor there, and he has, his career is all about preventing suicide in elderly individuals with mild cognitive impairment. And cool. He came to me and he explained his whole situation and what he does and how he's developed this wonderful technique for emotion regulation called PATH, which is Problem Adaptation Therapy. He said, look, we know that PATH works. It's a wonderful way of helping people emotionally regulate if they have a major depressive disorder or treatment-resistant depression. My biggest issue is that insurance doesn't really pay for people to come and get therapy anywhere near enough or anywhere near frequently enough to actually make a difference. Is there some sort of way that we can use technology to augment the effect of therapy, in a way that doesn't cost anyone any much more, but really makes a difference to the person? And so that was the first time when we sat down, we went to the whiteboard and we started sort of sketching out how we were going to do this. And then we enlisted a technology company, a great group called Intellecta, which they do a lot of mobile app development. And what was really important...
Wait, you didn't just try to become a magical app developer on your own?
No, I figured we should probably talk to some professionals.
Let's just make this point, because this is a point that I got to make to folks, and we'll let Tony make this point.
This is a very good idea, to not try to just pick up a book on Python and write your own. Unfortunately, a lot of our colleagues have attempted to do just that, mostly because they're desperate for funding, because they're so poorly funded, so they can't consider writing that into their grant because they can't get enough grant money to keep light bulbs in the sockets. But the truth is, if you want to get a great outcome, you're going to have make exceptional efforts. exceptional effort, expect exceptional outcome, and that's right how you do it. You get exceptional programmers to help you work on the project.
So go ahead and you get into electives. So you've got a person who's expert in suicide prevention. You have someone who's good at technology and sort of design of interventions, and then you bring in an actual team to do it. So tell us more.
Yeah, and to take it one step further, it wasn't just any app development company. It was a company that had a background in telemedicine. You know, that they were early adopters of telemedicine, and they've been developing telemedicine apps. But they also were experts in creating apps for emergency response. So they were. What really impressed me about the group was that they were really good at creating apps that were always on and that wouldn't fail. You know, like it's always there. It doesn't crash. It's rock steady. And
high availability, we call it in the industry.
Because that's another issue, which is if we make a technology solution, it's got, for someone who is at very high risk, it's really got to be reliable.
Yeah,
it's got to be reliable. Yeah, and so that was the team that we assembled, and we started working with that. Then we started doing some research. You know, like we knew that we wanted to create an app that was that followed path, problem adaptation therapy, and walked the therapist through this technique, because Dimitris really believes that this is a groundbreaking way to treat emotion regulation and help people become better at emotion regulation. And so we had an idea of how we were going to structure the app, but we also wanted to see the landscape and see what was out there. And you know, we had a quick scan, a quick, you know, Google app search. We saw, you know, a couple thousand apps out there that claim to be suicide prevention apps. Many of them.
Say that again. How many that claim?
Yeah,
Say that again. Don't breathe.
A couple thousand.
A couple thousand? We need a couple thousand more. I think that the solution is more apps. More apps. And I think, I'm going to throw this out there, a hackathon to see how many different apps we can create.
I think we should definitely.
I think there's more hacking required on your hacking.
Okay, all right. This is a joke. We'll talk more.
Sorry, it's a running gag from Twitter.
Did I cross the line? Did I cross the line? I'm sorry, David. David, I may have.
But he's familiar. So the issue is that there are a lot that claim, but the truth is that they're not necessarily interventions. So for some of you who are not as familiar with the app landscape, and I think Dr. Putrino can talk about this more, a lot of things that are apps are, here are the warning signs and things that you can say. Here is how to dial the number for the regular phone line. Or like SAMHSA has wonderful apps that are really just, you know, ways that clinicians can do suicide risk assessments, or apps that do safety planning. But they're designed to be used alone, and they're not really designed to be utilized in a clinical way, which really does involve working with your therapist, which MindMe is designed that way.
Correct. Yeah. So. So there's a lot of apps that do a lot of things. I mean, there are even apps that at any time at all will link you with a therapist using telemedicine principles, which is again a very interesting thing. But the major theme that we saw across here is that apps either did not acknowledge that a therapist is important in the process, or they really minimized the influence of the therapist-patient relationship. This idea that it's actually important to have a close relationship with your therapist. So similar, you know, apps that allow you to just.
Which, by the way, is like saying that the doctor writing the prescription on the paper is more therapeutic than the penicillin that you're getting. The relationship is the therapeutic, is like the medicine.
Well, I think that's a really great way of putting it, and to stay on the medicine theme, we actually, what we like to say about MindMe is that it's a prescribed app. We never want to be in a place where you can download MindMe from an app store. It needs to come through a relationship with a therapist who says, you are eligible for use of this app, and I'm going to fill it, I'm going to populate it with your information because it requires a prescription. This is medicine. Just the way in physical rehab, which is more my field, what we're trying to sort of change the narrative, the way we're trying to change the narrative in physical rehab is that it should be prescribed just like medicine. It's the same with mobile apps for mental health. You know, just because you can change, you know, apps are very powerful things. You can completely change somebody's mood with an app. And just like a drug can completely change somebody's mood. We prescribe drugs because the ability to change someone's mood should not be taken lightly. And so if you can do that, then a professional who has a lot of experience in prescribing these things should be modulating and monitoring exactly how much this medicine is being given to you.
But we need to replace all the therapists with robots, Dr.
But something because something David has said something that I've been thinking about for a while, and he's so far ahead of the curve on this stuff. We've had this model of psychotherapy, this 1 session a week model of psychotherapy, like that somehow is going to have this major impact on people's lives. And I've been thinking for a while we need to go to a physical therapy model of intervention, right? Doing physical therapy once a week is great, but what do they give you? They give you a ton of exercises, and if the situation is more severe, you're doing physical therapy 2 times a week, 3 times a week, or every day. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about the app that you're describing, it's really a way to expand the therapeutic relationship and the rehabilitation process, so that it's not this 1 session and we'll see you in a week. It's this session, I'm going to be in touch with you, and here's this app to support our relationship, and we've pre-populated this and we're working on it. 2, the other thing that's really, really important about this is that it's about really enhancing that muscle memory. That therapy is really about muscle memory and practicing things. If you're going to alter how you're responding, you've got to have a lot of practice. And I think this is why DBT, when we look at DBT and why DBT shows so much effectiveness in the research, is because it's the coaching calls, and it's that it's ongoing. And it's because the therapist actually follows up on the homework. A DBT therapist, a good one, is actually following up on homework. And there was a great study that showed that 80% of the homework that's given in therapy sessions, 80 to 90%, is not followed up on at the next session. Well, why would anybody do it? So these apps are really a way to connect the therapist and the client beyond the session and reinforce all these change behaviors that we're working on. And I think it's beautiful.
And we apologize. We're just excited about what you have to say. So keep going, Dr. Putrino.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, I'm really excited about MindMe, and I'm really excited about where we're going with it. But I do think it's fair to point out that in terms of using technology and using social media, using applications to improve mental health, I think we need to look at it in a lot of different ways. And to build off what Bart said, which is a really great point, I actually think that what we need to do is we need to raise awareness in general about mental health. And so there are, again, literally thousands of apps out there that can help you with mindfulness meditation and emotion regulation and calmness and all of these things. And I think those apps are great. However, what I think is that they're not for people with mental illness. They're for people who, just like we tell everyone that for heart health you should be exercising most days of the week 30 minutes every day, every single person in the country should be doing mindfulness meditation most days of the week for 30 minutes every day to keep their mind in shape, to keep their mind as healthy as it can be and at the lowest risk of a catastrophic event. Then, when someone actually needs help, they need to be taken to a therapist who can actually prescribe exercises, and then we can use mobile health and e-health to really sort of advance and optimize the treatment that these people are getting as they work, and that's where MindMe comes in. But initially, I'm not meaning to say that every single mental health app out there is garbage and no one should use it. But what I am trying to say is that if you can download it and it's offering you a generic solution, it's not that that advice is bad. It's just it's probably not there. It's not for someone with a serious mental health issue. It's for people who are not having serious mental health issues to keep themselves in a good place.
So it's like the difference between going to the gym and reading the chart on the wall and figuring out the weight circuit, or going to physical therapy because you were healing from a serious injury and having to do things in a very, very specific way. And so the idea about a prescribable app is that you're using that under the supervision of a licensed provider who understands that you are really, really sick and you need to be attended to carefully and expertly.
Exactly.
A lot of people have shied away from this, by the way. So I've been in a lot of rooms where they're talking about designing these kinds of things, and this is like, and the first thing they do is take prescribables off of the table, and would you explain why people would want to do that, even though you're doing the opposite? Why would people like immediately say, but it can't be like a medical device?
Because it takes too long and it costs too much money. So because people want to follow the Silicon Valley model of developing an app, which is get it to a minimally viable product as quickly as possible, and then just start using it with abandon and collect all of the data. That is a wonderful way to develop a Candy Crush, but it's not a good way to develop an e-health product, because you have a higher standard of responsibility when you're developing an e-health product.
And most people who are like, I think I can make an app, aren't thinking about, I think I can make a medical device. But they're intending it for a population that has a very serious illness and has a very serious risk of death. And so, like, that's sort of, they're under-resourced. So how did your lab, like, set about doing this? Because you're not solely in the mental health space. So the idea of developing, like, medical technology isn't new to you. Those hurdles are not new to you, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, we again, you know, I've really got to invoke my partners. We, you know, like the Demetrius and Frank and Nevin, who are at Intellecta. These guys are just amazing, and everyone.
Frank and Nevin.
everyone who sort of came to the table to get this app off the ground was very, very experienced, and we were just fortunate in so much that we could develop an app. We knew what we were doing. You know, it was kind of like, these are the steps we need to take, and these are the development milestones, and this is what we're going to do. And there was very little waste, and there was very little inefficiency. We just got it done, and we got to a point where the app was working, and we got IRB approval to start some initial pilot studies. We saw issues that people were having with interoperability, and, you know, and getting the app off the ground, and we went back and we developed a little bit more, and now, you know, we spoke to the NIH, and they're sort of convinced that we can run 2 clinical trials, one to look at suicide prevention, and one to look at emotion regulation in elderly people with mild cognitive impairment.
That's cool. That is like, so let's talk a little bit about when I think the traditional suicide prevention and mental health industry struggles to get to run clinical trials of any sort, like struggles like you would not believe. Tell us a little bit about, even though you do this in the space where there are things a lot riskier than just talking about people's thoughts and mood, why do you think it's been, because it's been harder for you to get to do clinical trials with this app than other technologies that you've built. Tell us what's happened.
You know, it's just for us the biggest bottleneck, and I mean, we're still running into it, because the app that we have right now isn't perfect. We would like to really develop it further. The biggest bottleneck for us is that in any field where you're trying to do something new with technology, there's always a little bit of a misunderstanding about how easy it is to do it. You know, we hear about, it's in the public consciousness. We are always hearing about a kid in the basement that developed an app, and now it's worth $1 billion. So people assume that it's easy to develop an app. And so it's been very, very difficult to actually solicit funds to build the app. That has been the most difficult thing for us. But once you have something, people are like, oh, this is amazing and it's wonderful, and absolutely, let's test it out. Even though both of the clinical trials that I just described, you know, they're pending funding, but they have had to be slipped into clinical trials of conventional therapies. So it's not that the NIH has quite yet funded us to exclusively test technology. You know, we're testing it as one more intervention in you know, in a range of interventions. But the biggest issue for us, the hardest thing to get funding for, has been you know, just the technological development. So
So so first of all, I've got to tell you all on the SPSM land, this is like one of those things where @DocForeman just sees something good in my social media feed, because I've set things up so that I'll counter things, and I make cold calls, and he's just the fool that picked up the phone, poor Dr. Putrino, and like we have these episodes. But the truth was that Putrino Labs actually very intentionally uses social media to educate people about the projects that they're working on and why they're valuable, as a way to grow funding, and to grow funding from many different streams, and as a way to as a way to facilitate getting these projects done that they believe make the world a better place. Tell us a little bit about, not just, you're talking about getting the money to just design and build the thing, and then getting grants to do the NIH clinical trials. Tell us about doing the media on your lab's projects, because that's really how I found you. BuzzFeed can find you. Everyone can find you.
Yeah, look, it's hard work. We've got a lot of really, I'm really fortunate that in my lab I've got a really fantastic group of creative, passionate, amazing people.
Dude, you have animations.
As with all things science, most of the people that work in my lab volunteer, just because they're incredible human beings, and they like what I do. So shout out to David Harari and Lucas Martins and Anna Smaragliola, who have been Anna works for me, but she's they've all been sort of going above and beyond, and so when we first started creating content for MindMe, it's really about just a friend of a friend had a camera, and another friend worked for an advertising agency, and we just begged, borrowed, and stole anything that we needed to do to just get the message out there. But it's such a huge priority for us in all of our projects to be very communicative about what we do, because a lot of scientists, really complain about the funding issue, but they don't really do anything to make what they're doing accessible to the public. And so when you think about the NIH, well, it's taxpayer dollars. And if you can't be really clear and concise about what it is you do and explain it to a lay audience, well, then you need to take a long, hard look at yourself, because part of your job is communication of science. Part of your job is getting people excited.
You were as sexy as Neil deGrasse. Way to go. That's exactly true. This is, sorry, I didn't warn you enough that we were inappropriate, but.
I think that she means Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right.
I got it.
But I screw up all the names. Let's be really clear for very important.
But it's not the 3 PhDs that I'm worried about. It's the people who are watching this are going, who's Neil deGrasse?
Wait, I want to back up. This is important. No, you're not. This is. David is suggesting that researchers have an obligation to be able to communicate to taxpayers who have funded their research in an accessible fashion what they're doing with the money and what it means.
Oh, yes.
No, stop. Whoa, we're going to get shut down.
I was talking with Dr. Julie Searle, who's president-elect of the American Association of Suicidology, and I was chatting with her earlier today on the Facebooks, and we were chatting about how the Mayo Clinic is now encouraging people, especially people who do clinical research and have academic appointments, that their evaluation for promotion and tenure and appointments to things is going to be based in part on their social media presence, that their ability to produce media and communicate what they're doing is going to be a factor in future promotions. We're moving in this direction. Dr. David Putrino at Putrino Labs, go find them on Twitter, and the Mayo Clinic, they agree. So, that's how we found you, and you get to be on BuzzFeed, which is super cool, by the way.
Yeah, amazing. It was so, and that was a great experience in of itself, wandering into their offices in New York and getting to speak with, a couple of the reporters there and going, oh my God, I've wasted so many hours on your website.
I watched college
Finally, I'm going to waste someone's time.
Over and over. Sorry. That's so what did you do that you think was successful? You said you have a lot of people in your lab who are willing to create stuff, to create media content about your research projects. What worked?
I think it's really about people get very self-conscious with social media, but we just sort of push people to
Not us. Sorry.
to just go for it. You know, it's interesting because I actually think that our Twitter page is probably our weakest modality because none of us fully understand Twitter. Like, we're great with Facebook, we're great with Instagram. Twitter, it's just like it's too fragmented for me because I'm very verbose.
Dr. Bart Andrews, we've had him less than 2 years, and he had never hardly done this at all, and now he's got like 6,000 or 7,000 followers, and his wife and his son have small businesses on Twitter, and you got to get him. He's the boss.
Yeah, I need some help because we love Instagram. We love we love storytelling, and we really we just try and make it part of the lab ethos that just tell people what you're doing. Just always just.
Have you gotten on the Snapchat?
Sorry?
Have you gotten on Snapchat?
I have a personal Snapchat account. I haven't quite yet gotten the lab on Snapchat, but I think that
We've got SPSM snaps, and so big shout out to Atos84 is going to be doing the blab. But speaking of telling stories, I can barely use it, but I understand that once you turn 40, it's like Snapchat just doesn't work for you anymore.
Exactly, yeah. You're just sort of pouring at the screen in effect.
My daughter tried to teach me Musical.ly today, and I was like, I can't do this, and she's like, Mom, it's so easy, and my daughter is 10. But yes, so telling stories about your lab. So what are some of the stories that your lab has told about the MindMe app? Because I've seen them, but describe to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has just been basic awareness. This is what the app is. This is what it does. This is how it works. This is how it's different from other things out there, and this is what we need, which is I think another very important thing about telling stories. This is how you can help us, because that's probably the biggest question that we get after. After telling people what we do. Then the next thing that has been really kind of hard to do, but pretty important to us, is we're starting to create a repository of stories of people who have been touched by suicide in some way. So we've released one video, and we're gearing up to release a couple more videos of. One video was actually from Anis Maragliola, who's the research fellow in my lab. After we had been working on the app for about a year, believe it or not, her father committed suicide. And that was just, our whole lab is a family, and that was just a complete blow to the family, and he was a mental health professional. I attended his funeral. It was full of people who stood up and just told stories about how he had changed their lives, that how just getting to know him and having him take an interest in them had changed their lives and put them on a trajectory where they're now doing well and they're amazing and so on and so forth. So it was this great man who knew everything that anyone else should know about suicide prevention, and he took his own life, really pushing home the idea that this is everybody's problem. There's not a single person on the planet who's immune from this. And Anna was really just brave enough to get up and talk about the stigma that she's felt since having her father commit suicide, the feelings that she's gone through, the sort of journey that she's gone through, having to try and get back to a normal life. Yeah, so we're trying to really make people feel how personal it is, because I don't know, people my really, again, I'm not anywhere near as experienced as you guys are in clinical things and dealing with this all the time, but what I've learned from just doing research on this project is that the way that this differs from other pathologies is, although it's more common than anything that I usually deal with, almost everything that I usually deal with, people sort of selectively forget the details, so every single person knows someone who's committed suicide or knows of someone who committed suicide, but they don't talk about it, they don't remember it, they're very hazy on the details. They say, oh yeah, absolutely, I can share a story about this, but then they never do because it's too painful for them to actually share the story. It's been really interesting to see and scary to see the culture of silence around it all.
Bart wants to talk, and I'm going to let you have the floor.
There's a lot to say. David, I am so honored to have you on the show. I think it sounds like you appreciate how cool what you're doing is, and I can just tell you, watching the thread and seeing how people are responding, they're very impressed, and just this is very, very special having you on the show. There's a couple of things, just listening to you talk, a couple of things clicked for me. I realized that the app scene that we're seeing now, that are mental health related apps, is kind of the difference between supplements and medicines. Nutritional supplements don't require any regulation. You can make whatever claim you want. They churn these things out and churn these things out.
And they make a lot of money.
And they make a lot of money. I'm not sure people are making a lot of money with mental health apps, but maybe they are. But it's unregulated. They're easy to churn out, and we're telling people, hey, this helps, and maybe they work and maybe they don't. And the model that you're proposing is that, no, let's create something that's tested, that's verified, and that's prescribed as part of therapy. And I think that this is the first time I've heard about prescribed apps in this way. I do. I think the Ginger IO kind of has a similar format, maybe. But that's very cool. Some folks had one comment. The amazing Desiree L. Stage, who has joined us, she's back from Yale already, so she finished. It's all done. She mentioned that she just did an interview. Desiree interviews suicide attempt survivors, takes beautiful photographs, and tells their story online. And she just did an interview, and the person she interviewed had been using the MindMe app, and it's the first time that she'd ever heard about it. And the person said the MindMe app was more helpful than their therapist. So there's a major.
And that'll get published. Des is our friend at Yale. She does the livethroughthis.org project where she interviews people who have survived the suicide attempt. So this is, and she, photographs the Rolling Stone and does other things because she's fancy. But
yep. And then there was a question. You mentioned PATH. Problem adaptation therapy. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
We've cited some articles and pushed that out there, but folks had some questions about that. And so one of the questions was, where's it being used? How widespread is it? So I mean, it sounds like it's something that's relatively new. And then if you could just do like a very quick description of what that looks like for folks, so they can kind of picture it in their mind, I think that'd be really helpful.
Before we switch that gear, and we do want to ask about PATH, before we switch that gear, just want to take a minute to acknowledge that you are doing a project about, as part of connecting people to the research in your lab, you're doing a project about raising awareness of people who have been lost to suicide and people who've survived attempts. There are people working in that space, and if you want to connect with us after the show, I know that if you're doing anything, we of course definitely want to help with that. If you're using social media to tell that story, we have a lot of people who think that's a very important thing to do, and we'd love to collaborate with you in whatever way we can. Tell us a little bit more about PATH.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with a disclaimer that, this is Dimitri's domain, and so, I'll probably get an email tomorrow or a text tonight if I mess this up. But, it's a sort of a method that he developed, and he's developed it in collaboration with another researcher called James Gross out at Stanford University, and it's all about training strategies for emotion regulation, and it's particularly targeted toward elderly individuals, and really, basically, what they sort of started to discover when studying elderly individuals with treatment-resistant depression and major depressive disorder is that many of the negative emotions that lead to suicidal thoughts and ideations in this population, they're not these novel sort of stimuli that sort of pop out of nowhere and are really hard to predict. They're quite regular occurrences. They're things that happen all of the time, and when they happen, they bring on these negative emotions, and these people have impaired emotion regulation abilities, and so then rather than being able to bring themselves out of a funk, the emotions get worse and worse and worse. So a healthy individual, I'm running for the bus, I missed the bus, and I'm going to be late for work. If I'm a healthy individual, I'll go, okay, you know what, it's going to be okay, I'll flag down a cab, I'll call in to work, I'll tell work I'm going to be a little bit late. I come up with alternate strategies to quell my emotions, get myself back to a place where I'm happy, I'm doing okay. Someone who can't emotionally regulate will go, oh my God, I missed my bus, I'm going to be late for work again, I'm so worthless, I keep doing this, these things keep happening to me, maybe I'm just not any good at anything, maybe it would be better if I were dead. You know, like these are things that can sort of escalate. And so what problem adaptation therapy does is it tries to train individuals to recognize negative emotions and link them to particular stimuli. You know, try and understand, this is the emotion that I'm feeling right now. This is the thing that made me feel this way. And then either give them a distraction strategy or a reframing strategy, a change of perspective. So, you know, well, I'm not worthless, the bus was running early. You know, it's not my fault, it's this. Or I'm not worthless, I just spent a bit more time with my hair this morning, and that's okay because, you know,
fabulous.
I'm worth it. I'm amazing. Yeah. So that's really the idea of path is identifying the you know, and really owning the negative emotions that you're feeling, working out what made you feel that way, and then either distracting yourself from the emotion until the emotion goes away, or finding a way to reframe so that
Can I speak about a part of that intervention that I thought was actually quite excellent that I don't see usually designed into other apps?
Sure.
So one of the things that I want to speak to those of you who are looking at, I don't know if this is part of PATH, but I do know it's part of the MindMe app. So what happens is that you and the therapist sort of go through and decide what kinds of interventions are important. There are some setting of some parameters ahead of time. And so you're like, what am I feeling when you're feeling an intense, overwhelming emotion? And it's not a big list you're given. And then it gives you something to do because it's assuming that you aren't going to be able to just independently or spontaneously produce it, or you would have. Then it asks you if you feel better. And if you don't, it says, do you want to talk to your therapist? And then it hot buttons you to your therapist.
Oh my God.
So, Bart, tell me what you're saying.
So, well, this is just awesome. I mean, it's one, that it's so interactive. Two, that it gives you a strategy, but it also says, hey, this strategy might not work. If it doesn't work, here's another option. So that which I think a lot of times therapists say, here's your coping strategy, and then if the coping strategy doesn't work, you're just kind of fucked. I'm just gonna say it. Oh, you didn't do it right, which I think is what ends up happening. I'm not doing it right.
Right.
Instead of, this didn't work for you. The other thing that I find so powerful about this, because this is blowing my mind, it's connecting the emotional experience to the person's environment instead of internalizing the emotional experience. Everybody thinks these emotions are coming from themselves. It's this internal badness, when in fact most of our emotional reactions are responses to the environment around us, and helping people connect their emotional experiences with their environment is incredibly liberating and incredibly powerful. And so I just want to applaud. This is like the coolest thing ever. Yeah,
and let's be really clear that, like, even in DBT, and this is something like as a clinician, so I work with folks who have very high risk of suicide, or personality disorder, or chronically acute risk, and have not been doing well for a long time. And the way that we frame that is that the therapy has failed the patient, not that you can't fail at therapy. It's like, that would be ridiculous. And so we accept, and that's one of the things that we tell folks, is these strategies, we're going to teach you a bunch. But they may only work 50–60% of the time. That's why you have to know a lot of different things, and that's why you have to call for coaching, because the situation could be worse than and much more painful or bigger than the skill that I've taught you. And you may not know enough skills, or you may be overwhelmed. And so that's exactly what I like about that as a clinical app that says, did this one work? Because if not, the backup is we get you with a clinician. Anyway, I'm sorry. I really love that feature.
No worries. I mean, yeah, that's definitely you know, what we're trying to go for is making sure that every time you interact with the app, no matter what, you come away feeling just a little bit better. And at the very least, if you don't, someone knows about it immediately. Someone hears about it that you're not feeling better. I mean, and that's kind of the way, you know, a lot of what I do, I stopped talking about it as therapy or rehab, and I talk about it as human performance, you know, because I learned a lot from. I do a lot of work with Red Bull. Red Bull has a high performance division, and so.
Bart, did you read that part in his bio? Because that was for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was pretty excited about that.
So, you know, a lot of people might not know this, but Red Bull, they sponsor about 900 athletes. To be a Red Bull sponsored athlete, you need to be in the top 5 in your sport in the world.
Can I be a Red Bull psychologist?
You know what? You might be able to. You know, like they do bring up. Nope. Bart's saying nope. I don't know what this is based on, but you know, you've heard your answer.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Basically, their whole drive is how do we make people better? How do we improve human performance? And what was funny to me was when I started working with them on my first few projects, I came in with this sort of really dumb, asinine notion that, well, athletes, you know, they're genetically better than your typical person, and then they just train really hard, and that's what makes an athlete. And then you show up, and you start to see that it's not just about training 24/7. It's about being in the right headspace to train. It's about having every little thing optimized for you, so that every little thing that you do is like pushed to the absolute potential that it can be. And that's when I started to understand, well, shit, this is what we should be doing in rehab all the time. And we shouldn't even be calling it rehab. We should be telling people that this is a lifelong commitment to wellness, and that we're just improving your performance. And whether it's mental health rehab or whether it's physical rehab, no, it's all just human performance. We're making you perform better than you were before, because rehab applies that there's an end point. Whereas human performance implies that you just keep pushing yourself up that spectrum, because even if you had a major depressive disorder and you go through therapy and you're amazingly better, well, you still should be doing maintenance work to make sure that you stay better and get even stronger and you know, all the way forward. So you know, that's kind of what we're trying to sort of instill here, is how do we make people just every time they have an interaction feel as though they've made a little bit of progress toward, you know, a lifelong commitment to being well.
2 things. First of all, in DBT, that's why we call it coaching. I say this is just like if I was teaching you to do a layup. I wouldn't explain it to you once every 2 weeks in my office and think you'd do it. I will help you in the moment do it, because you have to learn how to do it, and I have to talk you through, because inevitably there will be little things. And we'll get really good at it, but it will take time, and that's why we call it coaching. Second thing, this is our last talking point. One of the things that SPSM wanted to ask, we said we realized that there were some barriers in this project. Like, I know that you attempted a Kickstarter but didn't make your funding. Sorry, sad trombone, but it looks like you found a way around. What things could SPSM be doing to support you and to support people who are doing projects like yours? Like, if you have the ear of folks with lived experience of suicide attempt, loss survivors, and people who are experts in media and suicide prevention, what kinds of things would make it easier to develop good projects?
Yeah, I mean, $1 million.
No, that's fine. Say that then. If what you need is $1 million, damn it, let's ask for the $1 million.
Yeah. I mean, number one is funding. Number one is we need funding to keep developing the platform. Number 2 is, you know, what I wish that we could do is really start to organize groups of experienced programmers who are willing to dedicate time to these sorts of projects.
Say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so to give you an example of this, you know, one of the things that I did with Not Impossible Project Daniel, where we created a self-sustaining prosthetics clinic in South Sudan. After we created that project, we were, you know, a group reached out to us called Enable, and they are this incredible group that started to develop far superior prosthetics to what we developed for our project. You know, they designed them, they made them 3D printable, and they created this community of makers all around the world where if you like get on their website and say, well, I'm missing a hand and I need a hand and this is where I live, they will direct you to a group of makers who are willing to print you out a prosthetic and fit you and do all the things that you need to do. And this is what technology has the potential to do. It's like it allows us to connect people that ordinarily wouldn't be connected. And so, you know, if we could, what would be fantastic is if we could all start to work together to create a resource of developers who are willing to just spend, I don't know, 1 day a week or 1 day a month working toward...
Like a hackathon, Bart!
No,
Hackathons,
really not
I'm
like a
telling you,
hackathon.
we talked about this. There's a direct correlation between the number of hackathons and the popularity of Donald Trump in the polls. Stop and think about it just for a minute. That's all I'm saying. Stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is something that we're good at building. So we're going to put that out in the universe, that we need a community of people who are expert at building technologies in the mental health space and in the suicide prevention space, so that when people come up with projects like, say, me, who are not experts in that we have partners in sort of a community, that we know how to, that there's a network and a community, we know each other, we can find each other to build projects that make a difference. And that's, I will tell you, that's something SPSM really does try to do, which is build a network for folks where one has not really existed before.
And then on top of that, you know, build it with an understanding that there's no sense of competition at all. You know, that's the other thing as you enter the sort of world of mobile health and app development. Everyone's sort of looking over their shoulder and saying, don't copy what I'm doing, and I want to be the first to do this and the first to do that. Forget about that. Like, forget about taking credit. Just, we've got a real big problem here.
Yeah.
How are we...
There's enough suicide to go around. We promise. Exactly. There are plenty of problems to solve, right?
How are we going to band together to solve, create a solution that we're all on board with? We don't really care about who gets the credit for it. Let's just get it done and get it out there.
Be clear that the MindMe app was not like David Putrino superhero. I mean, every time that we've talked with you about this and about different parts of this project, you've listed a team, like several teams who were doing different bits of this project.
Absolutely, and it never would have worked without all of these people cooperating and not even, you know, beyond cooperating, working weekends, working, you know, like working for free, doing all of these things because they were just passionate about what they were doing. If we had to pay for what we've done, it would have been $500,000. But because everyone just, you know, donated their time and worked and just tried to get it to the line, we've been able to create something pretty incredible.
But $1 million to pay experts would be fabulous.
Yes.
We're pretty and we're not cheap.
Absolutely, and you know, I mean, the other thing is that what we have right now is we have an application. What we need is a platform, you know, so we have something that we can install on devices, one device at a time, and it logs data and it saves it locally to that device. There's a big difference between that and the interoperability that you need to service millions of people. And so
get it in their medical record and because I mean, the way that you've got it designed, it's got to communicate with therapists, and if it could get in the medical record, generate notes, yada yada. And there are several bits that can do that, but that's not, you've got like a piece of the solution, but in fact there's more infrastructure that would have to be built, which does cost money. Wealthy people of Google.
Does cost
we
lots.
Love you. We're very
Red
pretty.
Bull. Maybe Red Bull could kick in.
Yeah, maybe Red Bull
money.
Or Watermelon Monster.
Rockstar money.
We're getting to what we call sort of the last 5 minutes. We do final thoughts, and this feels like a really good place to transition to that. And what we do is we talk a little bit, David, about what we think sort of the themes of like if we could only have one take-home message, if people only watch the last 5 minutes of the show, not that they would do that, but maybe they would do that. Like, what will we tell them? And so what I'm going to, and I usually will start because I think that that's an important thing to give you guys a minute to think.
Sure.
So, so as I'm thinking of, it's time for final thoughts. I hope folks who are tweeting, first of all, the Twitter feed has been hot tonight. there are several people who've had losses recently. Just want to let you know that we are with you. So I'm going to say that I think the final thought for me is that this is a really big public health problem, and that it really is going to take expert, selfless collaboration on a fairly large scale to build the solution that will actually work. It just is. And so I'm really grateful that social media allows us to get to know people like David Putrino, or to reach out to folks who are the mods on Reddit, or to talk with filmmakers, or to talk with data scientists. We really believe at SPSM that there are a lot of people who need to be involved in this solution so that suicide is no longer a major public health concern. What I hope for my children when they're old is that they can't imagine that they would know anyone who died by suicide, not because of stigma, because it's just not that common. And it's going to take all of us. That's my final thought. Tony?
Given that we know that medical devices that are currently on the market and being implanted inside of people by surgeons are not perfect, and they have passed through this gauntlet of a process, and some of those things are totally I'm not going to call them frivolous, but they're definitely much more about people's appearance than they are about their overall health. And what a wonderful thing it is to hear someone say, this is important enough that this should be a medical device. We should at least meet the minimum standard, if not maybe a little better. Yeah. What a great thing to hear.
Yes.
Somebody say out loud and have no shame about it. Like, this should be it. Bart.
So much goodness, David. So just watching the Twitter feed, this just blew folks away. There's so much goodness, and I think I'm gonna do a little bit of a bummer. It's disappointing to me that David, who's a physical therapy expert and a computer expert, knows more about good therapy than 90% of the therapists that I run into on a daily basis. That's absolutely frustrating to me, and I just can't even express. Second, one of the things that's so powerful about this, psychology always whines about nobody includes us in developing this or developing that, and the psychology has been the worst about not learning from other disciplines. And I'm going to say that again, psychology has been the worst about not learning from other disciplines, and the things that David is talking about in terms of physical therapy techniques and about performance are things that we need to be incorporating into our training and into our practice, and the app that's being developed to do that is so powerful, and I just applaud you, David. What you guys are doing is it's world changing, and this is the sort of thing that's going to be the future of mental health. I mean, we're going to get this done right, and I love the prescription model. I think that Candy Crush is great, but I don't think it's going to save lives in the way that we need life-saving devices. So I just applaud you and thank you so much for being on the show. Phenomenal.
And David Putrino, your chance for final thoughts.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's been so much fun being on, so thank you very much for the opportunity to just talk about this, because I think every field should have something like this to talk about, and it's amazing. I mean, really, the final thought for me is that in terms of digital health, e-health, these little devices that we have just have so much power within them. They're with us all the time. They know us better than we know ourselves. And so they have a lot of potential for creating health solutions. The main thing that I've got to stress is that a phone at any point during the day can significantly change your mood. So if you're trying to develop something that its entire intention is to change your mood, that's medicine. And you can't half-ass it. It needs to be done really rigorously and thoughtfully and in collaboration with all of the experts. And so that's what we're trying to do, and I hope that we do it well.
Brilliant. Everyone, we've had another hour with SPSM. Head on over to the blab at SPSM Unpacked. Something has the power to change your mood. That's medicine, and you can't half-ass it. You heard it here, Dr. David Putrino, everybody. I think that is a wonderful note to close on. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Please do take some of these ideas with you as you were discussing them. And please do reach out, like up, and follow at Putrino Labs. You can also see, you have a Facebook page, right, Dr. Putrino?
Yes.
And
yes,
it's
Putrino
active.
Lab. Yep, active Putrino Lab Facebook page. Yep.
Go like it up. You can follow some really great stuff. See how a lab does it well, does it right, in my opinion. And have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Good night. Excellent show. Good night, SPSM.
Good night, everybody.
Boom.